Christmas came early, folks. That's right. I mean, balance changes happened pretty recently. So like usual, I reached out to some of, if not the best players in the world to help me rank every single brawler from worst to best in a competitive setting. Massive thank you to them for their expertise. Starting off with the F tier. Probably shouldn't play these. Kicking us off at the bottom of the tier list is Hank. Hank finally received the long overdue tank trait that charges his super from taking damage, but it still has not made very much of a difference for him. He's still the worst brawler in the game. Next, we have Mr. P moving from the D tier down into the F tier. Mr. P, he is one of the weakest brawlers in the game, and he's even more useless now since the last update. Doug is staying in the F tier. There might be a map or two in the current map pool where Doug can actually be used in very rare circumstances. For the most part, though, he's pretty unplayable competitively. D tier brawlers. Still sucky, just not as bad as the F tier. Oh, Edgar. Edgar's staying in the D tier. More hypercharges added to the game, and no buffs to Edgar means that he's being played even less. At least in the competitive meta, he's very close to falling down in the D tier or in the F tier. To be clear, when you're not playing competitively, which is what I do not play competitively. Edgar's still pretty freaking fantastic. He can be really good, but yeah, not competitively. Bull is staying in the D tier. Nothing's changed for Bull. He's still one of the worst close range brawlers in the game. Bonnie's actually moving from the F tier up into the D tier. She didn't get buffed, so she's still really weak, but there are one or two more particular situations where she's just not terrible. Well, she's not the worst option. BB is moved from the C tier down to the D tier. Personally, I have no issues with this. I don't know what it is about BB, but I always suck at playing against BB. But anyway, several of BB's counters have moved up in the tier list, so she's being played hardly at all right now. Grom is staying in the D tier. Grom is still the easiest thrower to dodge by far, and he can't do anything to brawlers that get close to him. Miko's moved from the C tier down to the D tier. He got a small health buff, but more brawlers that counter him are much stronger now, so he's even worse now than he was in the previous update. Okay, now we have C tier brawlers. These ones are also not very competitive except for very niche situations. Starting us off as Rosa, staying in the C tier. She's another close range brawler that is really close to being bumped down a tier, but she's actually a decent counter to a few brawlers still. Colt is staying in the C tier. Colt is still only a competitive option for heist just because of how much damage he can deal from a long range to the safe. He's too tough to use though competitively though in any other game mode, which is why he's only in the C tier. Chuck is staying in the C tier as well. Another brawler that's pretty much only good in heist, but he is much harder to deal with than Colt once he gets his posts set up. Chester is moving from the B tier down into the C tier. Chester's best used as a tank counter, and there are just so many other better options at countering tanks right now in the game, so he's just not being used very much competitively. Charlie's moved from the B tier down to the C tier. Now Charlie was being used quite a bit last update when she got buffed, but it didn't take long for people to realize that she's still actually pretty weak. Buzz is staying in the C tier. Not Buzz Lightyear. He's a little bit higher, just regular Buzz, C tier. Buzz is a solid close range brawler, but he's just too easy to counter, so he's going to have to get significantly stronger if he ever wants to make it out of the C tier, or he's got to be like, for some reason, a really good counter against the best brawler in the game. Oh my gosh, it's happening. Mo is moving from the S tier down into the C tier. And of course, it happened right after I unlocked him on my free-to-play account. I actually never got to play super strong Mo, so there's a reason we're having the pro players do this ranking here. Mo's nerfs from last update weren't enough to make him balanced, but the nerfs from this update may have gone slightly too far, and now he feels pretty below average. Fang is staying in the C tier. Similar to Buzz, Fang just has too many counters that can either dodge his super or push him away after he uses his super, but he honestly still probably has one of the best hypercharges in the game. El Primo is staying in the C tier. He actually received a buff to his health, which makes him slightly more usable, but he still just feeds the enemy supers a little bit too much. Shelly is moving from the B tier down into the C tier. She's another brawler that is best used for countering assassins and tanks, but there are just much better options being used right now for that. B is moving from the B tier down into the C tier. B has remained the same for so long that she's finally been power crept to the point of C tier. I'm sure she's gonna make a comeback once she gets her hypercharge though, because man, she could be strong. Leon is staying in the C tier, at the top of the C tier. Leon is only good against brawlers that struggle to find him when he is invisible, and lots of brawlers with wide ranged attacks can easily find him before he gets too close, and those brawlers are kind of at the top of the meta right now. Okay, B tier brawlers. These ones can be competitive on the right map, on the right mode to counter certain brawlers, or just because they're decent overall. Oh my gosh, Jackie's moving from the C tier up into the B B tier. Jackie didn't receive any buffs, but not only has the meta changed in her favor, more importantly, the current map pool is actually pretty good for her. Brock is moved from the C tier up into the B tier. His abilities to break walls without even having to charge a super is the main reason why he's being used more this update, but he's still below average overall. Bo is moving from the C tier up into the A tier or B tier. Bo's just a little bit better than he was before because of a few counters his that are not being used as much right now. Meg is staying in the B tier. Meg can still deal some crazy damage, but her range is just too short for her to be a top tier brawler at the moment. Sam is moving from the C tier up into the B tier. Sam is also slightly more playable than before, mostly because a lot of the top brawlers are support brawlers that play really well with him. Mandy is staying in the B tier. No changes were made to Mandy. She's still a decent sharpshooter on open maps. Jessie is still in the B tier. Again, she didn't receive any balance changes. The meta hasn't seemed to affect her too much right now. She's right around where she was in the last update. Draco is moving from the C tier up into the B tier. Similar to Sam, Draco is a decent tank to play with if you're playing him with a good support brawler, so we're seeing a little bit more use of him right now. Pam is staying in the B tier. She's still one of the most balanced brawlers in the game, which makes me think that she's going to be really good once she gets a hypercharge. Cordelius is staying in the B tier. We lost the F tier. Don't worry, I'll get it back. Cordelius can still counter a lot of strategies with his super, but he's not quite as dominant in 1v1s as he has been in the past. Crow is staying in the B tier. Crow is a solid brawler on maps where you need to be able to check the bushes, and he's also really good at countering against tanks, but his stats are a little underwhelming at the moment. Ruffs is moved from the A tier down into the B tier. Ruffs' hypercharge may have been a little overhyped with the last update, and with the new hypercharges this update, Ruffs is back to being, you know, a decent support brawler. Carl is staying in the B tier. Carl is still a great brawler against teams that don't have brawlers who can stun him and interrupt his super, but that makes him kind of a risky choice right now. Lily is staying in the B tier. She gets countered just as easily as other close range brawlers in the C tier and D tiers, but she can approach enemies a little bit better than all of them with her gadget. Kit is staying in the B tier. Kit can create very strong strategies, but if the enemy team can draft against it, it's pretty easy to deal with, so he's not the most competitive brawler right now. Tick is staying in the B tier. Aside from Tick being the most fragile brawler in the game, he doesn't deal enough damage to handle aggressive brawlers. That being said, he's one of the best brawlers for preventing enemies from healing and also being able to slowly chip away at them, so Tick has some uses. Dynamite is moving from the C tier up into the B tier. As far as throwers go, Dynamite's attacks are pretty easy to dodge, but he deals the most damage out of all of them, so still decent actually. Willow is staying in the B tier. Willow got a huge buff to the width of her super, which has made it a lot easier to land, so she's probably better than ever before. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Was she really good? I can't remember if she was really good when she was first released. Every brawler seems to be. But yeah, anyway, B tier for her. Ems is staying in the B tier. No changes were made to Ems. She's exactly where she was last update, actually. Spike is staying in the B tier. Spike didn't get any balance changes either, and he might be actually slightly worse now just because there are better options than him in almost every other situation. Nani is staying in the B tier. She got a few buffs to her hypercharge stats this update, which just hasn't made that much of a difference overall, but she has more potential to turn a game around now. Pearl is staying in the B tier. Pearl is certainly not the best brawler, but she's one of those brawlers that you usually can't go wrong with, and some might even say she deserves to be a little bit higher on the tier list. Especially in knockout, man. Pearl's good in knockout. Lola is staying in the B tier. Lola also has enough damage and range to almost never be a bad option, and I really think that when she gets her hypercharge, it's probably going to break the game. We'll have to see, because she's pretty decent overall right now, especially when you consider the fact that most every other brawler has a hypercharge and she doesn't. Poco is staying in the B tier. Poco is being used a little bit more than before because some of the best brawlers that he supports are now also being used right now. Terra is staying in the B tier. Terra is pretty weak at long range, but she can shred through enemies at close range, and she has one of the best supers in the game. Sprout is staying in the B tier. Sprout gets countered pretty easily, but if it can find itself in a match where there are no aggressive brawlers and no wall breaking brawlers, it's the best brawler in the match, right? Like, yeah. Mortis is staying in the B tier. Mortis's hypercharge is the only thing keeping him in the B tier, but in a competitive match, he might not actually be able to charge it even once, depending on who again he's up against. So you gotta play Mortis carefully. Nita has moved from the A tier down into the B tier. Nita is a pretty solid choice as long as the map has a good number of walls. Otherwise, she's probably just going to feed all the enemy their super pretty much the whole game long, but yeah, anyway, otherwise she's pretty good. Bella's staying in the B tier. She's a decent sharpshooter, but her biggest issue these days is that she usually loses 1v1s against other sharpshooters in the game, so there isn't much reason to play her, at least not competitively. She's great against noobs who just can't seem to stay away from their teammates though. RT is staying in the B tier. RT's attacks can be kind of tough to land, and he gets outranged by most other sharpshooters, but his super makes him a really safe choice in any situation. Squeak is staying in the B tier. Man, I'm just having flashbacks right now to when Squeak was like super ridiculously strong because of his gadget. I'm glad that's over. But Squeak is still pretty weak against aggressive brawlers, but he can provide some of the best map control in the game on certain maps. Otis is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Otis was an A tier brawler last update, mostly because of how well he countered a lot of the top brawlers, but the meta has switched up enough to where he's not being used as much. Clancy's moved from the A tier down into the B tier. Clancy's movement speed got nerfed pretty hard while in stage 3, and that was definitely the only thing keeping him in the A tier after all of his previous nerfs. Griff is staying in the B tier, and that pesky F tier just keeps on running away, doesn't it? Griff actually received a small buff to his super damage, and while it has been a little bit better than before, the buff wasn't quite enough to move him up a tier. I'm just waiting for the day he gets his hypercharge though. Let me tell you, he's gonna be so busted. Barley's moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Barley, along with most other throwers in the game, have been power crept by the new best throwers in the game, so he's not clearly as threatening as he used to be. You'll see which brawlers I'm talking about. Juju, Barry, Larry, and Larry. Sorry. Whew. Sandy is staying in the B tier. Sandy gets outranged by a ton of brawlers, but on maps with plenty of walls, he can still be very valuable to his teammates. Colette is staying in the B tier. Colette is actually still one of the best tank counters in the game, but there is a lot of healing and shields going on in the current meta, which Colette does not do well against. Buster is moving from the A tier down into the very top of the B tier. The meta has finally shifted in a way to where Buster isn't quite A tier anymore, but he's still a pretty safe option. And now we have the A tier brawlers. These brawlers are typically good in a lot of different situations. They're just not quite as good as the S tier brawlers. Kicking us off, we have Kenji moving from the S tier down to the A tier. Kenji's reload speed was nerfed this update, and he has finally been nerfed to enough where he's not broken. He's still a very solid brawler though. I've been having a lot of fun playing Kenji. Shade is moving from the S tier down to the A tier. Shade had not been released during my last tier list, and I think that it was a little overestimated because of how strong its super is. But after the pros have been able to play it some, it just doesn't have enough range to be as broken as we thought it would be, which is perfectly fine. They released a non-broken brawler. Gale is staying in the A tier. Gale is still a good counter to aggressive brawlers, especially on maps that have walls where his range isn't that important. Gene is staying in the A tier. A few more of Gene's counters have risen in the meta, but his ability to easily check grass has kept him in the A tier for this map pool. Piper is staying in the A tier. Piper lost the slowing effect to her auto aimer gadget, but it hasn't made a big difference for her since she's never really needed the slow in the first place, and her other gadget is used most in competitive matches anyway. Angelo is staying in the A tier. Angelo is still one of the strongest sharpshooters in the game, but he really struggles to get past brawler pets, so he's struggling a little bit right now. Still though, A tier. 8-Bit is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. No balance changes were made for 8-Bit, but both the new meta and the map pool have done him a few favors. Larry and Laurie are staying in the A tier. Ever since Juju was released, Larry and Laurie haven't been played quite as much. They're still one of the strongest throwers in the game though. Maisie is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Maisie received a buff to her attack damage and to her total health. Even though she still probably isn't as good as where she was when she could charge up her super in 3 hits, she actually has some pretty strong stats right now. Amber is staying in the A tier. Amber is still one of the easiest brawlers to use. She has good range, she deals tons of damage, so until she gets nerfed, I don't see her getting booted out of the A tier anytime soon. Daryl has moved from the S tier down into the A tier. Daryl didn't get nerfed, but he was the go-to option for an aggressive brawler last update, and even though he's still really good, there's a few better options right now. Oh my gosh, Janet's moving from the D tier all the way up into the A tier. Oh, and we lost the F tier again. Janet received her hypercharge, and that was all she needed for her to go from being one of the worst brawlers in the game to one of the best. Still not S tier, but yeah, I mean, her hypercharge is actually a little bit harder to control than I thought it was going to be because of where the rockets actually land, but still much better than before. Rico is staying in the A tier. Rico's multi-ball launcher gadget received a nerf to its damage, but as long as Rico's hypercharge can do what it does, he'll be staying at least in the A tier. Byron is staying in the A tier. No changes were made to Byron. He's still very good at healing and dealing damage from a distance, so you can't really go wrong with him. Max is staying in the A tier. Max is just another really great support brawler that's pretty much never a bad option and can really improve the effectiveness of other certain brawlers. I don't know why I suck with her, but it's fine. The pros have proven time and time again she's gonna be really good. Okay, this is one of the very few placements where where the pros didn't have much to say. We're putting Ollie starting out in the A tier. Ollie has not been released at the time of recording this video, and most pros agree that he looks strong, but not totally broken like most brawlers are. This is the one where myself and my content producer Moxie took the liberty of placing him in A tier because we've actually had experience playing with him, and we don't think he's going to be broken. But still probably pretty strong, which honestly is probably a good thing. Eve is moving from the C tier all the way up into the A tier, which I just love for Eve. Eve received her hypercharge this update, and similar to Janet, that was all it took to bring her from below average to above average. Gray is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Gray also received his hypercharge this update, and a lot of the classic Gray combos are making a comeback, which forces players to be a little bit more careful when drafting. Lou is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Lou received a buff to his reload speed, which has made it easier to charge his super, and it has made a huge difference for him. Frank is staying in the A tier. Man, you guys remember when Frank was in the F tier for like 4 years in a row or something like that? It wasn't that long, but still. The damage boost from Frank's power grab, star power, has been cut in half this update, and even though his 2-star powers are now more comparable, he's still a really strong brawler, which I love because I've always liked playing Frank. Penny is staying in the A tier. Penny is still being played very well into the current meta, and ever since she got her range buffed, she has been a tough brawler to counter. Melody is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Melody received a nerf to her super charge rate, and she honestly really needed it because she's also received her hypercharge, which probably would have been broken if she hadn't received that nerf. She's very close to the top of the A tier. Barry is moving from the B tier up into the top of the A tier. And somehow we lost the F tier again. I wish I could just make this wider, but that's not how this site works. So anyway, there you guys go. Anyway, Barry received his hypercharge, and not only has it made him one of the strongest throwers in the game, but he's also one of the best healers as well. And now we have the S tier brawlers, the cream of the crop, le creme de le creme. I think that's what people say. Anyway, these are the best brawlers in the game. At the bottom of the S tier, we have staying in the S tier is Stu. Stu has been an S tier brawler since he got his hypercharge, and at this rate, I think he's going to remain an S tier brawler until he gets nerfed. Surge is staying in the S tier. He also received a nerf to his total health, but it hasn't affected him hardly at all, and his hypercharge still makes him one of the best brawlers in the game. Ash is moving from the A tier up into the S tier. The brawler who has seemed to benefit the most from getting their hypercharge this update is Ash. He already jumped up in the last update with the buff to his rage bar, and now with his hypercharge, he's the strongest aggressive brawler in the game. Gus is staying in the S tier. And where Ash is the strongest aggressive brawler in the game, Gus is the best support brawler in the game because he deals plenty of damage himself, and his super makes so many aggressive brawlers almost impossible to kill. A Gus with an Ash is just... it's just naughty. That's right, I said it. It deserves a big lump of coal in its stocking. Juju is staying in the S tier. Ash is the best aggressive brawler. Gus is the best support brawler, and Juju is the best thrower in the game right now. Enemies usually have to waste a ton of ammo to get rid of her Gree, and her range while in the grass just makes her nearly impossible to avoid. Okay, we got 2 more placements to go. For starters, second best brawler in the game, probably Meeple. Meeple has not been released while recording this video, but Meeple looks, it's clear he's going to break the game when he's released. His shots look very easy to land. He can trap people inside a throwable wall, and he can allow his whole team to shoot through walls while the enemies cannot. Just seems so busted right now. Take this one with a grain of salt because Meeple has not been played by the pros yet, but I think that Meeple's gonna be busted. We'll have to see. But the best brawler in the game right now is Buzz Lightyear. Even though Buzz Lightyear cannot be used competitively, I figured I needed to at least include Buzz on this list just because of how broken he is. In fact, even before recording this, he got nerfed, and we still think he's going to be the best brawler in the game. Despite the nerf to his saber mode and his laser mode, the pros still think he is the strongest brawler in the game, and most agree that his laser mode and wing mode belong in the A tier, but saber mode is just way too strong. And, you know, maybe things will shift a little bit since I'm literally recording this like the day after he got his nerf. But yeah, I think we can all agree that Buzz was either awesome to play or completely ruin the game for just a little bit. I personally had fun. I know some people didn't though. And that is every brawler in the game ranked from worst to best. If you grab that screenshot and share it anywhere, make sure you do not crop my face out. Also, I'd appreciate you guys telling people to use code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop if they choose to do so. Most important thing is they're supporting somebody. Another massive thank you to all the pros who helped make this tier list. And don't forget to leave your thoughts on this tier list in the comment section below. Also, massive thank you to Moxie Moron, who is my content producer, for helping put this all together. He streams on Twitch. Make sure you guys check him out. There's a link in the description below. Make sure you subscribe for all future tier lists. And check out this video. It's going to be a good one. I can tell. Actually, I don't know which one it is, but YouTube has chosen it as one that it thinks is best for you, so you should watch it. Trust YouTube. That's right. If you don't trust me, just trust me. And yeah, anyway, you'd probably trust me more than YouTube. Anyway, goodbye.